The Westies were a New York City-based Irish-American gang responsible for racketeering, drug trafficking, and contract killing. They were partnered with the Mafia and operated out of the Hell's Kitchen neighborhood of Manhattan. According to crime author T.J. English, although never more than 12 to 20 members, depending on who was in or out of jail at any given time, the Westies became synonymous with the last generation of Irish in the birthplace of the Irish mob. According to the NYPD Organized Crime Squad and the FBI, the Westies were responsible for 60 to 100 murders between 1968 and 1986. In the early 60s, Mickey Spillane stepped into power vacuum that had existed in Hell's Kitchen since the gang leaders fled the area in the early 50s to avoid prosecution. A mobster from Queens named Huey Mulligan had been running Hell's Kitchen. Spillane, a native, was his apprentice until assuming leadership. Spillane sent flowers to neighbors in the hospital and provided turkeys to needy families during Thanksgiving, in addition to running gambling enterprises such as bookmaking and loan sharking. However, among all his criminal activities, the most audacious was his snatch racket, which entailed kidnapping and holding local businessmen and members of other crime organizations for ransom. He was able to add to his neighborhood prominence by marrying Maureen McManus, a daughter of the prestigious McManus family, which had run the Midtown Democratic Club since 1905. The union of political power with criminal activity enhanced the gang's ability to control union jobs and labor racketeering, moving away from the declining waterfront and more strongly into construction jobs and service work at the New York Coliseum, Madison Square Garden, and later the Javits Convention Center. In the late 70s, the Irish mob saw an increased threat from the Italian Mafia as the Genovese crime family sought control over the soon-to-be-built Javits Convention Center. Since the convention center was located in Spillane's Hell's Kitchen neighborhood, Spillane refused to allow any involvement by the Italians. Although the Italian gangsters greatly outnumbered the Irish mob, Spillane was successful in keeping control of the convention center in Hell's Kitchen. The Italians, frustrated and embarrassed, responded by hiring a rogue Irish-American hitman named Joseph Mad Dog Sullivan to assassinate Tom Devaney, Eddie Comiskey, and Tom Capados, three of Spillane's top lieutenants. In 1977, Spillane was assassinated by Roy DeMeo in a hit set up by Jimmy Coonan, who wanted to take over from Spillane. Coonan recruited the infamous DeMeo after a deal was struck between the two. By rubbing out Spillane, DeMeo's crew could then do business with his successor. DeMeo initially came into contact with Coonan after the latter had murdered loan shark Ruby Stein. The war first began when an 18-year-old Coonan swore revenge against Spillane following the Spillane-initiated kidnapping and pistol whipping of Coonan's father. In 1966, Coonan fired a machine gun at Spillane and his associates from atop a Hell's Kitchen tenement building. Although Coonan wounded no one, Spillane understood that the younger hoodlum was not to be taken lightly. Spillane went to Coonan's father, slapped him around, and told him to get his son under control. Coonan was in prison for a short period for murder and kidnapping charges that were pleaded down to manslaughter. He was released in late 1971 and continued his war with the West Side Gang. Hell's Kitchen was no longer safe for Spillane and his family, and he moved to the then Irish working-class neighborhood of Woodside, Queens. With Spillane gone, his control of the rackets in Hell's Kitchen began to deteriorate. Coonan became the neighborhood's boss, although some still viewed Spillane as boss. On the New York Commission, Spillane was still viewed as the Irish mob boss on the West Side, putting the Javits Convention Center under his control. Anthony Salerno, a high-ranking member of the Genovese crime family, wanted the center for himself and reached an agreement with Jimmy Coonan. If Coonan became boss, Salerno would run the construction site and give Coonan a taste of the proceeds. Salerno then reached out to Buffalo crime family associate and freelance hitman Joseph Sullivan to eliminate the three main Spillane supporters in Hell's Kitchen: Tom Devaney, Tom Capados, and Edward Comiskey. Comiskey had apparently switched sides to the Coonan camp after they both killed Patty Dugan for killing Comiskey's best friend, but Salerno and Sullivan were not aware of the switch. Devaney and Comiskey were killed in late 1976, and Capados was killed in January 1977. Spillane was out of the picture, and Coonan was the undisputed boss of Hell's Kitchen, though it was felt that Spillane still had to die. Roy DeMeo, a Gambino crime family soldier, murdered Spillane as a favor to Coonan. Mickey Featherstone stood trial for the murder but was found not guilty. During the late 70s, Coonan tightened the alliance between the Westies and the Gambinos, then run by Paul Castellano. Although both Westies leaders were imprisoned in 1980, Coonan on gun possession charges and Featherstone on a federal counterfeiting rap, the gambling, loan sharking, and union shakedowns continued on the West Side. After DeMeo himself was murdered, Coonan's Gambino connection became Daniel Marino, a capo from Brooklyn. Coonan eventually interacted directly with John Gotti, who took over the Gambinos after Castellano's murder in December 1985. Gotti appointed Joe Watts as a liaison to the Westies. From time to time, the Westies worked for the Gambinos as contract killers. Featherstone was convicted of murder in early 1986 and began cooperating with the government in hopes of getting the conviction overturned, and because he believed that the rest of the Westies had framed him for murder. The information he and his wife Sissy provided, and the recordings they helped make, achieved this goal. In September 1986, the prosecutor who oversaw Featherstone's conviction told the presiding judge that a post-conviction investigation had revealed that Featherstone was innocent. The judge overturned the verdict. At that point, the information provided by the Featherstones resulted in the arrest of Coonan and several other Westies on state charges of murder and other crimes. Shortly afterward, federal prosecutor Rudy Giuliani announced a devastating RICO indictment against Coonan and others for criminal activities going back 20 years. Featherstone testified in open court for 4 weeks in the trial that began in September 1987 and concluded with major convictions in 1988. Coonan was sentenced to 60 years in prison on assorted charges. Other leading gang members were also sentenced to long prison terms, including McElroy, who was sentenced to 60 years, and Richard Muggsy Ritter, a career criminal, sentenced to 40 years on loan sharking and drug-related charges. By the early 90s, the old demographic of Hell's Kitchen neighborhood was disappearing. The blue-collar Irish-American community was being displaced by a more affluent and ethnically diverse group of residents. With this change came a decrease in street crime and a change in leadership. Bosko Radonjic, an American Serbian nationalist and one-time anti-communist, started his Westies affiliation as a low-level associate of Jimmy Coonan in 1983. He became the boss of the Westies when Kelly went on the lam and was instrumental in the fixing of the John Gotti 1986 racketeering trial. Around 1992, Radonjic fled the country to avoid jury tampering charges. He was eventually arrested by U.S. Customs officials during a stopover in Miami, Florida in 1999. However, Radonjic was released when the main witness in the case, Sammy Gravano, was deemed unreliable. Radonjic returned to his native Serbia where he operated a casino and nightclub until he died in 2011 from poor health. In 1992, a man named Brian Bentley was identified as a member of the Westies and was implicated in a burglary ring responsible for victimizing over 1,000 businesses throughout Manhattan. When Michael Cherkasky, chief of the Investigations Division of the District Attorney's Office, was asked how much still remained of the Westies, he said, "Too much, and that it's not the end of the gang." For nearly 2 decades following the end of the Yugo era, there was little mention of the activities or even continued existence of the Westies. But in 2012, the New York Post reported that the Westies resurfaced under the leadership of John Bocoon, who was caught, along with accomplices, smuggling marijuana into the U.S. The New York Times noted that, aside from being the nephew of former Westies, Bocoon had no connection to any gang using that name. However, the Westies is a title created by members of the press in the mid-'80s, referring to the gang. As pointed out by English, at no point did members of the Westies ever adapt the label or refer to themselves as such. At present, the Westies' current strength and status is unknown. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more of our Mafia TV series, please like and subscribe. Until next time, forget about it.